$3,000. Used to bring maybe $3,000 when I started doing this, not long after my Apollo days in the late 80s. But now it's called brown furniture in quotes, and it's not a positive thing because there's a lot of furniture like this nice mahogany set, and if it's not antique, there's just not a lot of buyers for it. There's a lot of people who are downsizing and decedent estates, and the supply is just very high and the demand just isn't there anymore. So set like this that might have brought 3,000. Now I see them at estate sales and they're struggling to get 500 a lot of times. So brown furniture is fortunately typically not good. But now I'm going to give you some more positive news. There is some brown furniture that's is desirable. This is Mission Oak or Arts and Crafts, and this is late 1800s to early 1900s. You can see the nice design on the quarter sawn oak in the back panels, and it's got straight lines. You can see it's the market on this has dipped a bit since I started doing this again 20 years ago, and we got over $1,000 at auction for this sofa, but it would be a little bit less now, maybe 25% off, but it is still desirable. What's gotten really hot is mid-century modern furniture. And there was a show, Mad Men, that was on that depicted a lot of settings in the 1960s, and it got very popular. And this is a room divider that brought over $1,000 at auction. It's Danish teak, but even now it might have even bring more. The market is very, very hot for this. And there's other things I should mention, like Ames, Knoll, some of the other mid-century pieces. The prices just keep climbing. And this is a real antique here. This is a period piece, and it's a card table. There were swing legs, so it would open up and it would make a complete circle. But you can see that it was nicely done by a cabinet maker, and it was made by a cabinet maker in New York. And it's nice veneer covering, and there's it's marquetry, they call it, which is the inlaid pieces on the side. And we got over 20,000. It was actually closer to around 24,000 at auction several years ago, and may have dipped a bit if we sold it now. But if you have a nice piece of period furniture, if it's American and it's by a good cabinet maker, the market's still strong. Here's something a lot of people have, Waterford crystal in their house, and it's very difficult to sell. Again, it's supply and demand. There's a lot of people are downsizing as decedent estates, and there's a lot of crystal out there, and just people aren't using it so much anymore. So you might see even only $5 or $10 a glass for a nice Waterford. In comparison, here's some more mid-century modern. This is Costa Boda. It was a piece, so it's mid-century modern, and it has the designer's name on the bottom. So Nordic pieces and Murano glass from Italy, very hot. The market's quite strong. These brought about a little over $200 in our auction, which ended last night. We run all online now. We had to change our format during COVID, so this was in an online auction. Again, to next thing that isn't selling well, China sets. Could be a beautiful pattern, Haviland Limoges or Bohemian China, but the market just isn't there. Unfortunately, a lot of people aren't having formal dinners, and this is something we've seen dip quite a bit. Sets that might have brought $500 20 years ago. Sometimes it's $100. So China and China like this just isn't selling well. But one formal thing that is doing very well is sterling silver, and you can see some here. And what to look for if you have silver at home, make sure on the bottom you see sterling. But if it's English, you may just have hallmarks instead of the sterling mark. Some other things to look for are the pattern. You can see this is a very ornate pattern and was very desirable pattern. You look at the maker. If you see Tiffany, you can know it's going to be more desirable. So when we sell this or require it, we look at the weight just to get an idea of what the minimum value will be on it. But the more intricate the design, the rarer the pattern, it'll sell for well over melt value. Like this was a very desirable pattern and brought at the time about $20,000 for the 2 sets. Here's some clocks, and your average clock market also has dipped with, unfortunately. So you can see some regulator clocks, a cathedral clock, and those that clocks again that might have brought 200. You're struggling to see $50 for. But there are other ones that are a lot more desirable. This one was kind of beaten up, but it was a Simon Willard clock. There's a Willard Clock Museum in Grafton. And even with all the damage, this one still brought $800. So if it's a really good piece by a craftsman, the value is still there. Here's something else not quite as desirable. Yadros, Hummels, figurines like this are, the prices are really depressed. Fortunately, we see these a lot in homes, and I have to give people bad news that the market has dropped so much. A lot of times you see Hummels that used to bring almost $100 selling for $10. So that's bad news. But better news is there's a lot of collectibles that are selling very well. Old toys are popular. If you have the box with it, like this one, it can double the price. This sold probably it's been 15 years at one of our auctions, but brought about 500 then, and I think the price would still be pretty close. Coins are always popular. This is a gold one, but silver coins are desirable. And it may not just be the silver and gold content, the date matters and the mint mark. So if you have a silver dollar, you can look at the back. If you see CC on there, could be a rare one, or it'll certainly be worth more money. It was from the Carson City Mint, and so that coin could sell for thousands of dollars in very good condition from that mint. But overall, they're going to go for above melt value. But if the better condition and a rare mint mark and date will make the coin worth a lot more. Some other collectibles that are desirable. There's we sold a group of the Incredible Hulk comic books. Comic books from the 60s and earlier are very hot with collectors. And even though we had the first issue ever produced, and the way to check them, you can, as you look at the screen, you'll see that this is 12 cents. So 12 cents and 10-cent comic books were made in the 60s. So you know they're fairly old. And we had the first issue of the Hulk, like I mentioned. Condition was really rough. The cover was loose. It was not in good condition, but still brought over $5,000 because it was a first edition and because comic books are so desirable right now. Also, baseball cards are also trending now. The Michael Jordan movie that came out on Netflix, the series, helped create a lot more interest in sports collectibles. So cards values just have soared during the pandemic. And so you can get cards graded, like you see this one right here is graded, and it shows it's a 1.5, and that's out of a 10. And this was a Ty Cobb card, but it was a rare one because they were made by different companies, but this happened to be a rare maker, and there aren't a lot around in existence anymore. So this card in our auction in November brought over $50,000. Other cards, 60s and earlier, can also be desirable. A Mickey Mantle card from his first year in 52 could be worth in the millions if it'd have to be in prime condition though and grade near a 10. Uh, Advertising things always popular. Here's a hood tires sign from the 20s or 30s, and that brought over $700 when we sold that several years ago. Um, Firearms, they have to be at least 1898 before we can sell them, because then they're antique, or otherwise you'd need a federal license to transfer them. So this is a Colt revolver, Civil War era, and the condition is really good on this one. One thing to look at if you have them at home is to see that the serial numbers match up. There's serial numbers all over the guns and on the trigger guards on the top of the guns, and just don't want to see that someone didn't put components together to recreate one. If the components all match, it's going to be a more desirable piece. And then condition on this one was pretty good. You could see a little bit of wear, but it was still brought $2,000 at auction, also several years ago. Artwork can be very desirable. If you have antique paintings, you can go online and look them up. You can sign up for it's on Ask Art or another website, and you can use that to research the artist and see what their paintings sell for. There's also Davenport's guide. You could go to the library and see what the artist's works are sold for. This one happened to be local to me. I'm outside of Worcester, and Joseph Greenwood was a Central Mass artist. And so every time we have some of these, they sell well for us. And this is a picture of Mount Wachusett in Princeton. Did a lot of local landscapes, and it was an impressionist painter. And the size makes a difference. This one was less than 2 feet wide, maybe 1.5 feet, and brought over $2,000. Musical instruments, you would, if you have some of those and you want to see, learn more about them and see if they're desirable, you can get a flashlight and look inside the 2 slots. Sorry, I don't know the names. I'm not a musician, but maybe someone can help me with that after. But I shine a flashlight in there and you can see the name. And when we sold this cello, it happened to be by a very good cello maker, and brought over $1,300 at the time, even though it started to delaminate, and there was all broken in spots. Because it was made by someone, a good maker, someone was going to get it restored. This is an old weather vane, and this is quite old, maybe even 18th century, and had a person who asked me to sell this for him. And so I consider it a piece of folk art. These are pretty very desirable. This brought over $5,000 at auction, and you can see the patina or the natural wear and aging on it, and that helps. Sometimes with more modern pieces, someone will try to fake the aging, and they might put acid on metal and it gives it that greenish color, but this one was all real and good. Here's a poster of this, advertised Harper's Weekly in 1898. We had a group of posters, and they all sold very well. 15,000 for the collection, but the golf ones were more desirable. A lot of golf collectors out there, and the golf posters were bringing well over 1,000. Here's stoneware crock, and I'm sure many of you have seen these, but this was a very early one. A lot of times you'll see them, the cobalt design is different. This is a lighter design, and a lot of times also you'll be able to tell where it was made. On the top, it might have a 1 or a 2, and it'll have was made in Bennington, Vermont by Norton possibly, but the 1 or the 2 is the number of gallons it held. This one was had some cracks and some issues, but it was just early in a very nice pattern and brought 3,000 at auction. Something that's kind of interesting, we sold a collection of advertising signs from someone in Chelsea, and they'd written an article about him in the Globe, and he collected a lot of signs when the big dig was going on in the Faneuil Hall area. He picked up a lot of these, And so this hung in Boston and 1800s. And you can see it had some corrosion on the sides, but it was maybe 4 foot wide and was made of zinc and painted. And it was a sign for an optometrist. So in the early days, people coming over here, a lot of people couldn't speak English. So if they had an issue and needed to see an optometrist, they would know to walk right into the store to get served. This picked up from an estate in Cleveland, and it's a trade stimulator. So when you put in a penny, you would twist the handle and you could see a piece of gum would come out, but the clown would also make a motion and move around. And so it would help make kids more interested in buying gum. And was made by a company called Pulver, and had one person who thought it was interesting and said that they were interested in it and knew quite a bit about it, but thought it might bring 700. But there were 2 people in the auction who just loved it. We got 7,000 for that. And this we just sold in the last auction overnight. It's a project car. It doesn't run. The radiator's sitting in the trunk, but it's a popular year. It's a 1970 Plymouth Satellite, and it brought $11,000. So vintage cars, even if in the condition that this one is, if it's popular style, it can still have some value like that. This is a kind of an interesting, very interesting piece, I thought. We had this when I first started doing auctions, and person had gotten a lot of things from Admiral Byrd's estate in Boston. And this said, he said he had passed, but his daughter said that it had gotten thrown in the trash, and her dad rescued it, and there was a form with it that said it was deaccession from the Smithsonian. It was a sealskin coat that Admiral Byrd wore on his expedition, and brought about 8,000 back then. I'm thinking if now we've been doing this a lot longer and have a lot bigger following and probably see double that. And this is the last thing I'll share with you. The Admiral Byrd coat, nice piece of historical memorabilia, and this is also a nice piece of history. When I was collectibles appraiser on the roadshow, I was in Miami, and someone brought these in. There was actually 2 of these and some other documents related to Elliot Ness. And so I appraised them at the time at 40 to 50,000, and we ended up selling them in one of our auctions for $46,000 in the National Law Enforcement Museum in DC now. So that's the end of what I wanted to share with you. I'll be happy to take anyone's questions now.
Thanks, Wayne. If you want to unshare your screen, then
Okay,
you can see everybody if they wanted to come off camera.
All right, great, thanks.
Perfect. And then feel free to jump in and ask a question, or if you're more comfortable on chat, we can have.
I got a question.
Wayne, do people buy the silver cutlery for making it into other purposes, like jewelry?
Some people, yes, some people do, and they'll even buy silver plate for that sometimes. But
okay.
Yes, they do. Most people will keep if it's an entire set, we'll keep it complete. But if it's just a couple single pieces, they might do that.
Okay, thank you.
Wayne, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. It was great. I didn't catch the amount of maybe a 6-piece place setting of sterling silver.
Yeah, so what we do is, well, a quick way of doing it, you can, if you have even a scale at home, you can do this. So say that silver as at, we could use simple math, it's more than this, but say it's $10 an ounce. Sterling is 92.5% pure. So the sterling would be $9.25 an ounce. But if you could put it on a postal scale, and that would give you an idea of weight. Troy ounces is a little bit more, so you have to factor that in, but it's not that big a difference. But that'd give you a
Ballpark.
ballpark idea what the melt is. But if you have a more desirable pattern, it could be worth more. So you'd have to look at who made it, and then the
Yeah, it's Reed and Barton, the one I'm thinking of. That's a newer company, isn't it?
Yeah, but they've been around for a while, actually, though.
Yeah.
So they could it could be an older one, and they did make a lot of plates. So, but if it's Mark Sterling,
It's the silverware, yeah.
oh, okay, yeah. So,
Six plate Satins, I think.
Hi.
So with something like that, if it's not a fancy pattern and Reed and Barton, you could use that melt, but then figure it's going to sell for more than that, maybe 50% more or something like that, just to
Thank you.
give you a ballpark.
Thank you.
Hi.
You're welcome.
My photo's not up, but I had a question about the collectability of Waltham watches.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. So if you have a watch, some things to look for are, first of all, whether they're made of gold or a lot of them are gold filled or gold plated, and that's going to make a difference. If you have a gold watch, that's going to be more desirable. And shouldn't note that Waltham, a lot of you probably know, but maybe some of you don't, was Watch City. There was a huge, they were, the Waltham watches were some of the best in the world.
Yeah.
The company was running. So the other thing to do, open up the back, and you want to see the number of jewels on it. So you might see 17, 21, and the higher the number of their jewels, the more precision the watch is. You can wind it a couple times to see if it runs. Just spin it back and forth, but don't overwind it or it'll get stuck like that. So you can test that. You can also look at the serial number, and you can find out what year it was produced. If you plug in the serial number on the web, it'll tell you exactly when it was made. But they've been pocket watches have been selling very well. There are a lot of collectors out there. So typical Waltham, if it's let's say it's a 21 jewel and it's gold filled, it's probably 200-300 or so in that range.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wayne, I have a couple of questions that came through the chat. One was,
Sure.
what are the value of dolls?
Yeah, unfortunately, dolls have dipped a bit in price. So some like Victorian era porcelain dolls, I've seen the market dip. Even Barbies, prices have dropped on more modern ones. But you can check on the back of your doll. It's right if you just below the back of the neck, you're going to see marks, and it might say made in Germany, and it's going to have the maker name, and you can take a look and you can research some prices. Another way that I research prices, I subscribe to a lot of databases, of course, so I can do that. But it's really simple way is to go on eBay and look up past prices. So, but a typical doll, say early 1900s and in good condition, 24-inch doll from Germany, they might bring up $100 now.
I have another question.
Sure.
And I'm under John Rice. There's not a picture up there, but I was wondering, I have a lot of costume jewelry from the 50s and maybe even older than that. An extensive amount. Is that worth anything or?
It is. And first thing you can do with costume jewelry is check on the back or look it over and see if there's a maker on it. So there's some names that are more desirable, Hattie Carnegie or Trifari, Coro, or some of the names you might see on there. And they're not going to bring what precious metals and gemstones are going to bring, but they are desirable. And when we run auctions, we'll try to put a group of signed pieces together and sold in a small group. They could bring $100 to a few $100, depending on what they are.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I do have another question, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
My grandmother left me her piano, The company is Boston, Boston, I think.
Okay.
Would it be incorporated? I'm not sure. I'd have to go look. About 1909. It's in my living room. My grandchildren play on it now. But I've looked up the company and couldn't find too much information. And that's the name of the company, Boston. Are you-
Okay, yeah, I've seen pianos made by them before, and
Yeah,
pianos are difficult to sell. Something we don't handle because
mhm,
don't have the ability to move things
Right.
like that. But it could be a desirable one, and you can also do research on that. If I'll give you one other tip, there's a liveauctioneers.com is where we run all our auctions, and you can see past prices on there. But they are a bit difficult. It sounds like it's probably tuned well if your
yes,
family's
I've kept
playing
it.
on it.
And the keys are ivory, which I know is now forbidden to use, but this was built a long time ago. The keys are ivory, not
Yeah,
a
yeah.
synthetic.
There are issues with ivory, but
Right
at
now,
least
yeah.
but yes, but you can prove. I mean, if it's made in 1909, you know that it's going to be past the
Before
100
the
years or
rules
whatever
changed, right?
it is now, where you're
Can't
not
do
supposed to
that.
sell ivory during the
Right?
current period. But, the last piano we sold, well, the prices have really been there's been a huge range. I've had some that are $50 and people just don't want to touch, or then there's been some more desirable ones if it's a better maker. And I think Boston could bring into the thousands, but
I'll
that's
probably keep it. 'cause
something I
my
don't typically
grandchildren
handle.
play. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, you're welcome.
I have another question in the chat about Fiesta dishes. Are they worth anything?
Yeah, so Fiesta ware was very popular in 1950s, and it's very bright colors. And there's one thing, it's kind of mid-century modern, like we talked about during the presentation. So it is desirable. There are people who use it still and they like it. It's popular and kind of trendy, and people still like it. So that is desirable. They've made made copies later on too. It's not an exact copy, but they've reproduced it because there was so much interest. So if you have a big set, we had a big set that sold for over $1,000, maybe 50 pieces. So that's the ballpark on that. And one interesting side note with that is they used a uranium glaze in the orange. So I had someone who I met with one time at an estate, and he was a science professor, and they used a Geiger counter in one of his classes, and he could show him that there was radiation on
Yeah,
the orange
I've
plate.
heard.
My gosh.
I've read about that, yeah.
I have two other things that someone has put in the chat. One is on comic books. Is it just the superhero comics that have value, or do items like Dennis the Menace have value?
Yeah, they do. It's the superheroes are really the ones where you're going to see the record prices. If you might see a news article that a first issue of Superman sold in the millions, but those to have some value, and it comes down to the condition. I mentioned with the baseball cards, there's a grading system of 1 to 10. With comic books, there's also the same similar grading system, and it's 1 to 10. So if it's in very good condition, maybe it's worth having it graded, but probably looking more in the hundreds than thousands or millions with those. And if the condition's not great, then it's not going to bring that much.
What other sites besides eBay would you recommend to research values of items?
I'm a contributor to worthpoint.com, and so they take my auction data after the auctions, and I've got a subscription on there. But you can sign up for, I think, maybe a day or two, and or you could get a monthly subscription, and you can research things on there. They have a lot of prices, eBay past prices that you won't see if you go on eBay, and they also have a lot of material from auction houses like mine.
Another question is blue glass valuable? I also have a 1925 Lydia glass creamer red. I mean,
Okay, so the cobalt glass is desirable. It depends really on what it is. If it's maybe say it's 1920s, 1930s era, it's decorative, but the market on glass has slipped a bit. So if you had a pitcher, maybe $25 when it used to bring 75 when I started doing this. And the creamer, maybe as part of a larger set, might be more desirable, but a single piece, probably at under 25.
does foreign antique furniture lose its value in the US?
Yeah, unfortunately, most Americans want American furniture. So a lot of when I started doing this, a lot of containers filled with furniture would get shipped over from Europe. A lot came from Germany, but England. They would ship over huge containers and sell it here. There was some but it has dipped, and it typically didn't sell for as much as U.S. furniture, and it's especially noticeable with antiques. I showed that table earlier, and that was 24,000, 23,000. But a similar table from England, you're probably not even seen 1,000 for it.
There's an antique ladder chair that, that's like a chair
Right.
to a ladder.
Yes.
How do those rank with?
Yeah, so those are some people like those. So the back legs are like a ladder, and you can lift them up to have to use the ladder part. And those $50 in that range.
Okay. There's a Federalist convex mirror. How do you determine the age with that?
Yeah, that's trickier. You can compare it to other examples, but some things you can look for is see if it's if you can see the construction at all, that they use square peg nails that they used in the early days. So that'll be one tip. But just look it over carefully. If it looks like maybe it's new varnish on it, when you look in the back, probably is new. So, but yeah, just try to compare with examples that you might have to bring to an appraiser or send pictures or something to find out for sure.
Okay. What are ERTL toy trucks in demand?
Yes, so they are, and it depends on age, condition again with those. So if you got a 50s one, and the condition's going to be everything with it and what type it is. So if it's a tow truck, it might be worth more than a tractor trailer or vice versa. But an average truck, if it's 50s and in pretty good condition, you might see $100, just average.
Okay. I missed a question from before. What's a good website to use to determine the value of baseball cards? I know you had said grading, but is there one that you recommend?
Yeah, so there is. You can go to if you plug in baseball cards and values, you'll come to probably the PSA site, and they're a big grading company. So that'll give you an idea of what values on there. So if you plug in 1952 Mickey Mantle tops and value, you'll bring you to that site.
Okay. Next question is, what's the value of a Clark Music PA tube, amp, and speakers?
Yeah, that's without seeing it, kind of it's kind of hard to do appraisals from descriptions, but I probably want to do a little more research on that. But if it's a tube amp, then so you know it's probably 60s or so, or at least. So I would think you're in a few hundred, but that I think you need to do a little more research on and find out, because again, without pictures or best thing for an appraiser is to see something in person, but it's a little hard to give estimates just without actually seeing something.
Right. This is a great question. For all of the different things we've talked about, this question was, if a person is interested in selling, how do they go about doing it?
Yeah, so we could help you. You can email us at info@centralmassauctions.com and or call 508-612-6111. And if you have things you're interested in selling, so if you can email them to that email address I gave you, that'll be particularly helpful. And if someone wants, person who has that PA also, if you want to send me pictures, I'll take a look for you at info@centralmassauctions.com. But you can just give us an idea of what kind of things you'd have. And we're a lot of times, what I'll do initially is we'll first see the pictures, and then if we need to look at it more. If someone has an iPhone, we'll FaceTime, so kind of like Zoom, or we could even use Zoom. If you bring your phone around and you can show us what you have, we can kind of do a virtual assessment. And if it's something that's desirable and fits in with our auctions, we can help you, or we can point you in the right direction if it's something not for us.
Wayne, can you give that phone number one more time?
Sure. It's
I'm gonna put it-
508.
Yep.
612.
Yep.
6111.
6111. All right. And I put the email in the chat as well, info@centralauctions.com, correct?
Info at Central Mass Auctions.
Central Mass Auctions. Okay, I'll correct that.
Right.
Info.
May I, Wayne, I have a book question.
Sure.
I have quite a number of books, again, that same blessed grandmother and some other dear relatives. I have a book in front of me now, 1897. It's a manual of phonography, which is really a form of taking shorthand,
Oh,
which my grandmother took as a course. She took accounting classes as well in around the turn of the century, 1900. So there's the book from 1897, published in Cincinnati, the Phonographic Institute Company.
okay. Yeah, no, that's certainly interesting.
Yeah, it is
So-
interesting.
but some of the books that'll be most desirable are going to be first editions by
Okay,
well-known authors. If you have that and you have the dust jacket, then you've got a really desirable book.
Right. Is there a
so,
website about books? That I could look
You
up?
can look them up in the sites that I mentioned
Okay.
earlier, the Worth Point, liveauctioneers.com. That
Okay.
that's going to be, I think your book is nice, but it's going to be more limited appeal
Right.
to people than like first edition. So I think you're at under $25 dollars on
Yeah.
that, but it's a nice keepsake.
It's worth a lot to me. And it's written on, inscribed in it with my grandmother's writing, so that's nice. I'll probably keep it. Thank you.
Great. You're welcome.
Wayne, it's worthpoint.com.
Worthpoint.com, correct.
Okay. And then Live Auctioneers.
Birth Point.
Yeah, yes, and then eBay, of course.
What about records from this, like, vinyl?
Yeah, so rock and roll ones, 60s, if you have some of the Beatles and they're in good condition and you have them in the original jacket, some of those can be very desirable. There's some rarer ones that could be in the thousands. So your typical, a lot of 78s, if they're jazz and especially African-American artists, some of those might be desirable. A lot of other things, 60s easy listening are not so desirable. So it really depends.
What about typewriters from the early 40s?
Mhm.
Yeah, probably not so much from the 40s. There were earlier ones, and a person who dealt in them once told me that if you want a typewriter that doesn't really look like a typewriter, so if it has the ribbon on one side and the place to advance the ribbon on the other side, and it's a standard looking typewriter. Probably not so much, but if you have one where the keys come out of the center and it's a round dial, then it's going to be more something earlier that's going to be more of interest to collectors.
Right.
Wayne, do you see
Yes.
any trends that in perhaps 50 years, items that are around today would be of value?
You know, so but it's really a little hard to predict, but I can tell you that some of the technology related things have really gone up in value. So I had someone who used to run estate sales for me when I started several years ago, and we had some video games from the 80s or 90s, and there was he set up at the sale and was in the Worcester area, and there were people staying there overnight waiting for the sale to start. So technology things are really surprise me sometimes. If you have an original Apple computer, the Apple One,
Yeah.
you're looking at maybe $500,000 now. So I think technology is one thing. Things like that are going to be collectible. Younger people now, so the trends have shifted. When I started doing this, people who grew up in the 50s were collecting things that they liked during their childhood, and so maybe Roy Rogers and that type of thing. But it shifted as people have gotten older. So people who grew up in the 50s were probably dispersing with their collections and not collecting things. So now it's people who grew up in the 80s and the 90s and had the video games and the Transformers, and the prices on those are increasing. So it's maybe whatever is popular with 13-year-olds right now might be popular in 30 years.
What operating system would be desirable on the Apple computer that you were referring to?
Yeah, so this was one of the originals. So this was
Right.
one that sold for $500,000. It was just because there aren't very many around. It was a prototype that they had.
So
So
it didn't have an
would be-
operating system name.
yeah, I
Like one
don't. It
operating
was the
two.
Apple One. So whatever the original
Okay,
operating system was,
yeah.
probably I don't even know if they called it
Yeah,
version 1 back then, but whatever.
yeah, I
that
think
was. But
version was in it. Yeah, okay, thank you.
sure.
All right.
Okay. Toy train someone asked about, and I just got the message. So
Sure.
toy trains have there's some that are desirable, but the market again has slipped on that because people who grew up in, so I'm 64, people who my age, probably even a little older, maybe in their 70s, grew up with toy trains, and but now younger people, again, it's video games, and the toy trains have dipped in value. So it's a supply and demand, like I mentioned earlier. A lot of people selling off their toy trains, and not as many buyers. So the market has dipped on those, and so it depends on what you have. But there are some rarer sets, but and also sometimes we sell some newer sets. I have an estate that I'm working on. We've had about 6 auctions, and it's sometimes some of the newer ones, if they're in the original box in good condition, could be worth over $1,000 too. So if condition will matter, the age. If you have something pre World War II, that's going to be more desirable. So the old tin trains, Lionel and
yeah.
makes are going to be
Trains.
desirable. So it varies with trains, but that gives you some idea, hopefully. I think I missed one, but I'll go to this one. Is Covell and still a good for pricing, and it is. They so Covell's would travel around the country, and they get a lot of prices. They go to might look at auctions, they might look at antique shops, and so it gives you a pretty good idea of what something might sell for. If you're looking at auction results, so you're seeing exactly what something sold for recently. So I like to do that when I'm doing an appraisal. And I think I missed one.
I have a couple more whenever you have a chance.
Okay, yep, sure, I'm ready.
Ask about a Victrola 78 RMP record player value. Sorry,
Okay, so
RPM.
Victrolas, Victrolas depends a couple of things. Is it a tabletop model or is it a floor model? The tabletop ones are typically going to be worth a little more, but these just aren't as many collectors out there as there used to be, and I've seen them mostly selling for under $200. Even the tabletop ones now, which used to bring more. If you have a Edison's cylinder player, that's going to be worth more than that. So, but the under 200.
What about copper? Is probably bought or handmade from the 1920s.
Yeah, not as many collectors out there for that, but if you have something unusual, it could be desirable. So if you have something done by an artist and it's signed, a piece, it could be good. But copperware, pots and pots, for instance, not bringing a huge amount of value. You might see them in shops for $25 or so.
Someone has curved glass antique oak china closet.
Okay, so yeah, so probably bowed glass on the side, and again, it's brown, considered brown furniture. The market's not as great as it used to be, but it could be a kind of a wide range depending on where you sell it. 200 to 500 on bowed china cabinet oak.
And you answered the question about the Ashford Institute.
I didn't. I know. It's an auctioneer
Yep.
institute, correct? Yeah. So there are different places you can go to get your auctioneer's license if you're so inclined. And sounds like somebody is. So hopefully,
yes.
they'll. If anyone has the person who's interested, I'd be happy to answer questions with. Again, if you want to email me and ask me some questions. But they're one of the companies that does training for auctioneers. You have to get in 80 hours of class work, and then as part before you can get your auctioneer's license. So they're one of the companies. I've never dealt with them. I went through Yankee School of Auctioneering in New Hampshire, but they're out of business now. So I've heard of the company. I just don't really know anything about them.
Great. Hey. I don't have any more questions in the chat unless people want to unmute. Dan, do you have anything you want to?
Disney collectibles, someone just asked about. So some of them can be pretty desirable, especially you said early ones, the collectors out there. And you have an early Mickey Mouse during the 1930s. He was called Steamboat Willie. That can be pretty desirable if you have, depending on what you have, things can go into the thousands of dollars. And vintage posters, maybe something from the 50s again, very, very desirable. So older Disney collectibles can be very good.
Someone has a 1972 Blythe doll. Is that of value?
72 Life doll.
Blythe, BLYTH.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Yep.
I'm not familiar with the company, but most dolls, 60s, 70s, the market's dipped. Barbies that were bringing $500 before, we're now down to $2. So they unfortunately have dipped a bit, but that one I think they might have to go or eBay and check out prices on.
This question says, do you collect anything special?
Yeah, I do. So living in the Worcester area, I like a lot of local memorabilia, and I collected sports memorabilia mostly. I have it's not really a poster, but a display piece with a lot of players from the 1880s team that they had in Worcester. It was a major league team, ended up moving out of Worcester, but first perfect game in baseball was pitched in Worcester. And I have some contract when they applied to be join the National League, and I have those photos from when they did become a team. And I have things all the way up to the 1980s displayed in 3 cases at Worcester Red Sox. So if you go to a Worcester Red Sox game, go up to the 3rd floor and you'll see a display of some of the things I collected. And the other thing that I like is railroad related things, railroad things related to Worcester. I have a lot of signs and lanterns. The Boston and Albany Railroad was one of the railroads that went through town, and it's one of the ones I specialize in. That's the things I collect. Also, I'm a Finnish descent. The name Tuiskula is Finnish, and I like we collect some glassware from Riihimäki factory in Finland. They're called Nanny Still bottles, and they're mid-century modern. We have a little collection of those.
Great. Deco or Nouveau? What's more popular?
The Deco. So Deco, people like it. It's kind of like smoother lines. You have geometrical patterns, curved lines. The Nouveau is a little fancier, flowers, that type of thing, more to do with nature. But overall, I think Deco things sell better. Furniture is one thing that's doesn't sell particularly well. A lot of it wasn't made very well. There's Deco waterfall furniture, and it's just a lot of it's like plywood with a veneer. But overall, I like Deco better than Nouveau, and I think it sells better. Another one came in I missed. Did I? Maybe I can pull it up.
I had a
Here
question.
it is.
Is the Worcester
Okay.
team called the Woo Sox?
It is, yeah,
Yes.
that's it. All right, so I see some folks have been messaging me too, so
Okay.
I'll start with the first ones. Oops, try it again. Sorry. I guess maybe you're not seeing them, but
They probably message you directly.
yeah, I think so. I'm not sure how to get to it. I'm in a little technical battle here.
On the bottom, there's the 3 little dots that say more, and then you can select that.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I got back to him. All right, I was. So toy trains, we got, someone asked about the values of VHS tapes and classic movies. There really aren't a lot of VHS tapes that are really valuable. A lot of times you'll see articles in like Parade magazine or different places, and they tell you to look for these black diamond VHS tapes. But if you check websites like Snopes, it turns out that they're not really as valuable as you think. Someone asked about an old tube radio, and that depends. So a lot of them are, the ones that are more desirable, I'd say, are plastic, cattle and or kind of Bakelite, and they're a radio from the 20s or 30s, plastic, bright color. They make Bakelite ones also in black, brown, and white, but the ones that are very bright colors are a lot more desirable. We just sold one that it had a nice mix of like a purplish color and orange, and it was modeled, what can kind of mix together, and that brought over $2,000. Someone asked, going back to the trains, Lionel circus train, and that's a more desirable one. Condition is going to make a difference with that. So, but if it's in really good condition, last time I looked, they're around $1,000. Regina music box with the metal punch platters, and coincidentally, that was in one of those was in our auction last night and brought over $1,000. I think we had about maybe 20 discs that went with it, maybe a little more. Another question, fountain pens.
Wow.
And those can be kind of desirable. You want to look to see who made it.
Hmm.
You want to see if what it looks like, colors, that type of thing. But some fountain pens can be worth in the hundreds of dollars. Another question, is there a market for 19th century marble end tables? And Victorian furniture, unfortunately, is some of the furniture that I mentioned that just has declined in value. Pieces that were $400, nice marble top table, maybe $100 now. And I think I got through the ones that got sent to me.
Okay, so I have a 2-piece step back pine hutch of my grandmother's, probably dated from the late 1800s. No specific notations on it. It's very basic, almost handmade. How to accurately date it or a little more specifically?
Yeah, I think I'd go back to the square nails on that also. And you want to check, yeah, well, if it's been in your family, you don't have to worry. If you're buying something outside of that, there's modern paint that can be added. And so, but color is going to make a difference. If you get a nice robin's egg blue, it's going to be more desirable in terms of value. But dating it, you're going to have to try to either match it up with other examples or get an appraiser to take a look at it. But the square nails and the way it's designed will help you with that too.
What's the process to request appraisals? Would you recommend emailing you or another process?
Yeah, so if someone has a lot of things they want to appraise, we do an evaluation and I can discuss it more with them. But but if it's a couple things and you just want to know, is it something maybe auctionable, in the email would be the best way to start.
Okay, great.
And I got another one that came in. Someone has a military footlocker from the 1870s or 80s, and might have it'll have some value, of course, but not as much as something maybe during the Civil War or even World War II might have a little more, maybe of a little more interest to people. 1870s, 80s, right? Probably not as much. If you have the person's name stenciled on there, that'll help the value, but probably $100 range. Just again, doing it without seeing it, that's a ballpark.
Wayne, I have a thought about the brown furniture.
Yes.
This is Barbara. When I go through my things and they're not worth much in terms of the money, but they're worth a great deal to those who don't have them. And so I think I will be donating some of my brown furniture to some of the different charities that are important to me, including the women's shelters, the refugee programs, organizations that are helping the refugees that are coming to this country. And I think they would value, wouldn't you think, a nice table and chairs, even though they're not monetarily, worth a lot. I would think they'd be worth a great deal in usage.
That's great. Now that I highly encourage everyone to do that. That's
Yeah.
very
Donate.
thoughtful, and I'm certainly appreciate that. And there are a lot of people, like you mentioned, who need
Yes,
furniture.
Right here in Massachusetts. That could use them.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
A question came in about shipping chests from early 1900s for people coming from Europe by ship, like a footlocker.
Yeah, so a lot of steamer trunks came over, and or lockers. They might show what country the person came from, but just with something that big, there just typically aren't a lot of collectors. The collectors are looking for if they have a big collection, they're looking more for small things. They want, someone asked about radios. You can put 10 radios on a shelf, and if they're transistor radios, maybe you put 30 of them on a shelf. So they're looking mainly for smaller things. That would be maybe of interest to someone who's could use it for decorating. Maybe you put a TV on it, or maybe they have some connection to the person or country it came from. But typically under $100 on those. Question come in: what are early cameras worth? And so if you have an old wooden box camera, those can be very desirable, like ones on the tripod for used like dry plates. And we've had some that have brought around $1,000. But there's some more modern cameras. If you have a German made, like a Leica camera even from the 20s, they can be very desirable. Some of the values on those surprise me sometimes. You could be in the thousands with something like that as well. I think don't see any more messages for me here. Did anyone have any other questions?
Mhm.
Maybe didn't hit send.
Yeah, I do.
I think we've come to the end, but I think that was the most interesting
Yeah.
conversations we've been having. And
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this program. Thank you very much, Wayne. It was a pleasure to hear your expertise.
Yes,
And
thank you, Wayne.
we've got a lot of information. So everybody, thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you next month. Take care now.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Thank you very much,
Bye.
Dan. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.
It's pretty interesting. I didn't know